Hello, and a very warm welcome to all those listening live today and to anyone listening to this on a later recording. My name is Nalini Cook, and I'm Head of Global Research at ISC Research. In this data-led session, I'm going to be taking you through some key takeaways from our annual Global Market Overview. I'm going to switch off my camera now so that you can focus on the data on the screen, but I will rejoin you for any questions at the end of the presentation. For those of you less familiar with ISC Research, I'll begin by sharing some brief information about who we are and how we collect data on the international schools market. We'll then look at how the market has developed over the last 5 years before highlighting some important global trends impacting international schools around the world, and finishing with an overview of key markets at present and for the future. We should have time for some questions at the end, so do post any questions or comments you have during the course of the presentation in the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of your screens. It looks a little bit like two small speech bubbles. So let me start with a short introduction to ISC Research and what we do for those of you who may be less familiar with our organisation. ISC Research has been gathering data and intelligence on the international schools market for almost 30 years, and we track the market very closely for shifts, challenges, good practice, new developments, and of course, emerging opportunities. We process close to 300,000 data points every single year, spending 4,500 hours on verification to ensure that our data can be trusted. And this takes time, of course, because we don't just use AI to collect publicly accessible data. We collect our data directly from the schools, and we have a data verification team that checks every piece of data before it's analysed. The field research team, who you can see on screen and who many of you will have met in person, perhaps at various conferences, are based all around the world. We're dedicated to interviewing and talking with a wide breadth of international school leaders to gather reliable qualitative data and offer some insights from the ground that we gain through our physical presence and personal networks across regional markets. Now, there are almost as many ideas about what constitutes an international school as there are schools, but for the purposes of data collection and analysis, ISC Research includes an international school if it is either a privately operated school that delivers a curriculum wholly or partly in English to some or all of its students aged between 3 and 18 in a country where English is not an official language. Or it's a privately operated school that delivers a curriculum other than the host country's national curriculum, again, wholly or partly in English to some or all of its students between 3 and 18 in a country where English is an official language. An example of that would be an IB school, for example, in India, where English is a national language, but the IB curriculum is not the national host country curriculum. Just a few of the key data points that we gather include school location and ownership, age phases, student enrolment, capacity, student nationality, fees, contact details of staff across a wide variety of functions and seniority levels, staff salaries and benefits, teacher nationalities, facilities, accreditations, association memberships, examinations and curricula, and school resourcing, and there are many more. That data collection means that most of our data and intelligence that's supplied by ISC Research is collected directly from senior leaders at international schools. This data and intelligence gathering, it's conducted year-round by our field-based research consultants and supported by our desk-based researchers. We also use a variety of trusted local sources, market experts, and government bodies to acquire reliable market intelligence. The raw data and intelligence is then verified and analysed to produce the most reputable, current, and comprehensive research on the international school sector. And because we've been collecting and analysing this data for more than 25 years, IC research is also able to produce some really valuable market trends and projections. Now, our data is live. That means we're constantly adding to it. The data that you're going to see on these slides today is based on a data point snapshot from the 1st of July, 2023. Since 1994, we've been using our data to help guide schools with their growth plans, to inform investors on new school developments, help universities to engage with international schools, and advise education suppliers and other partners who support this market. IC Research shares our data in a variety of ways, including an online data platform, in-depth reports, data sets, and expertise on the market, as well as specialist areas of practice within international schools. If you use social media, you can follow us on LinkedIn, X, or Facebook to ensure that you are up to date on all our news and resources as they become available. And I'll show you some easy links with QR codes if you'd like to follow us towards the end of the presentation. So now you know what data we collect and how we do it. So let's take a look at that data itself. Now, what you're looking at here is how the world's international schools market has grown in the last 5 years. And that's despite the challenges of a global pandemic. The number of schools has increased from 12,123 to 13,614. That's a 12% growth. The number of students currently stands at 6.7 million. The number of teachers is almost 650,000. And tuition fee income has grown by 18% over the past 5 years to $58.4 billion US dollars. Throughout the extensive challenges of COVID-19, including things like expat repatriation, salary challenges for some families, and restricted access to school facilities and extracurricular provision, the international schools market overall maintained its enrolment and in some cases even gained as a result of student transition from local public and private schooling to access better quality online learning. As a result of this show of strength, we've seen displayed through various crises in the past, investment and development within the international schools market, which continues. Research carried out in 2020 by IOC Research into past global crises, including the 2008 global financial crash and the 2014 oil and gas crisis, demonstrates that the international schools market recovers surprisingly quickly from such serious setbacks. A figure that's not on your screen, but which may be of interest, is that as of July 2023, ISC Research is aware of 313 future international schools, either under construction or in the planning phases. So let's break these global figures down into a little bit more detail. We're looking here at the global markets by regions. And you can see that Asia dominates the international schools market with 57% of all international schools. In real terms, that means 7,774 international schools as of July this year are teaching a total of 4.3 million students aged between 3 and 18 in the region. The presence of international schools in Asia is shared fairly evenly between East Asia, Southeast Asia, Western Asia, and Southern Asia. And the top 5 leading countries in the world for schools are all in Asia. That's China, India, the UAE, Pakistan, and Indonesia. A UK curriculum is the most popular foreign curriculum offered by international schools across Asia. And I think it's important that we note that international schools are changing in their makeup. They're no longer the domain of Western expatriates as they once were when they first came into being. Today, most students attending international schools are local children from the country in which the international school is located. They might be expats from all countries of the world. There might be third culture children who don't particularly associate with any single nationality or culture. Now, on the first growth slide, I mentioned that overall market growth for schools over the last 5 years was 12%, from 12,123 to 13,614 schools. This slide breaks down that growth by region. And although Western Asia has the greatest number of schools overall, with 2,076 schools, it only had 8% growth in the last 5 years, compared to Southeast Asia, which has had 19.5% growth and now has 2,003 schools. Growth in other regions includes a 7% growth in East Asia. They now have 1,904 schools, an 8% growth in Southern Asia to 1,732 schools, 12% growth in South America to 991 schools, 15% in Southern Europe to 672 schools. Interestingly, the majority of that is in Spain, and 14% in Western Africa to 540 schools. Now, although this graph may look incredibly similar to the previous one, what we're actually looking at here is the growth in student numbers rather than schools, and you'll notice some difference. Overall enrolment within the international schools market over the last 5 years has increased 11% to that 6.7 million students that you saw on screen earlier. Our research shows that demand for English medium international school education, particularly in Asia, continues to grow. Our July 2023 data analysis shows that 64% of all current international school student enrolment is located within international schools in Asia, notably higher than the 57% of all the English medium international schools it hosts. And this is not a short-term trend. Over the last 10 years, since July 2013, Asia has seen a 59% increase in its number of international schools and a 61% increase in student enrolment. The graph you can see here shows the enrolment totals and highlights in red the growth during the last 5 years of the 7 leading subregions of the world for international schools. And again, those top 4 of those are all in Asia. Western Asia, which is the Middle East excluding Egypt, continues to dominate international school student enrollment. Southern Asia, Eastern Asia, and Southeast Asia are all experiencing strong growth in demand. Based on our continuing field research and data analysis, ISC Research believes that the subregions likely to see most notable growth of international schools and student enrollment in the near future will be Southern Asia, largely driven by India, Eastern Asia, driven by Japan, Southeastern Asia, driven by Vietnam, Singapore, and Cambodia, and Western Asia, driven by Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and to a lesser degree, some growth across Europe, but more on this later. We've talked about the growth, but let's have a look at what it is that's actually driving this growth. In many developing countries, the increasing accessibility of international school options is fueling the admissions demand. But even so, there are many other options, often more affordable, available. So why an international education in particular? Our research shows that there are 6 core reasons fueling an increasing demand for international school education. Firstly, many parents select an international school because it offers English as the language or one of the main languages of learning, which in turn then grants access to an increased number of future pathways, whether that's at higher education level or perhaps future careers. Others are attracted by the standards of teaching and learning and the student-centered approach that many international schools offer. One of the things that my team and I have discussed with leaders quite a lot over the last couple of years has been this move by local children to international schools, where parents feel that pastoral care and their children's well-being isn't as baked in to the school's ethos as it is within an international school. Parents often choose an international school because they want their child to secure the globally recognized qualifications that an international school would offer, and they're not available in their local public school. Again, with an increasing awareness of the value of first language skills and culture to a child and the community, the offer of bicultural language and learning, with English as one of the languages and the language of the country in which the school is located as the other, attracts many local families who would otherwise have to choose a monolingual option. The broadening of tuition fees by international schools is making the market accessible to many more families, including host nation families and expatriates, within a much wider range of salaries than was typically available in the past. And finally, some of the very wealthiest, educationally aspirational, brand-conscious parents are turning to the most premium international school in their local city for schooling and personal prestige, rather than sending their child to board overseas, as they traditionally may have done. Less wealthy, but no less aspirational parents with the financial means are now turning to an international school to fulfill those wishes for increased opportunities for their children, with social media and peer pressure often highly influential amongst young parents, and that's impacting their school choice. Within a particular location, there's often a lack of alternative educational options that offer globally recognized qualifications, learning in the language of English, and a pedagogy that adequately prepares young people for higher education and the workplace. So that's just a quick overview of some of the most important reasons for growth in this market. The factors impacting that growth of international schools can change rapidly, though, with macro and micro environments playing a huge part. These vary significantly from one country to another, particularly where government regulations change, but they're also influenced by socioeconomic shifts, such as the movement of people and the international development of cities. Having looked at the key numbers, I'd like to now look at some of the current trends dominating the international schools world at the moment. Firstly, let's take a look at curriculum. Curricular offerings are changing throughout the international schools market, most notably with a move towards more hybrid curricula. The proportion of international school students who are following a UK curriculum only is declining. Our data shows that within the last 5 years, this has reduced from 6.8% of the total student market to just 2.8%. And it's the same for US-oriented curriculum, and even with the International Baccalaureate, as you can see on the screen there. This reflects a really significant change in how international schools are using curricula. Today, a growing number of international schools combine various strands of national and international curricula together, such as some programs from the International Baccalaureate or from Cambridge International, some elements or programs from the UK or US, plus quite often some elements from the national curriculum of the country in which the school is located. These schools tend to be moving towards a more international orientation within their ethos and vision. Such hybrid curricular models are gaining most popularity throughout the market, and it's where we're seeing the most growth. As you can see from our data there, 24.4% of all students attending international schools in 2018 were following some elements of a UK curriculum along with other curricula. This had increased to 26.9% by January of this year. And a similar trend has occurred for US-oriented curriculum in combination with other curricula. When it comes to curricular choice, our field research suggests that many international schools are now looking for curricula that allow flexibility, that enables the school to adapt them to the needs of their location, student community, school vision, and ethos. Popular options include curricula such as the Cambridge International Programme, edXcel, or the International Baccalaureate programs. Most international schools today that only follow a national curriculum of one country, such as the national curriculum of England, make adaptations in order to take into consideration the country that the school is located in and the demographic of the students. Let's move on to assessment. Recent research into the future of assessment carried out by ISC Research showed that formative assessment remains the most used form of assessment in international schools. While the use of audio and visual recordings supported by digital platforms featured across assessment of all K through 12 age groups, there were also some interesting age group specific developments. For students aged 5 to 10, many schools said alongside the introduction of audio and visual recordings to support formative assessment, they're now also using digital platforms to present work and support assessment, including Google Classroom, Seesaw, RazKids, Padlet, Kahoot, Flipgrid, IXL, Pear Deck, and Nearpod. Those are the ones that were mentioned to us most frequently. Several schools conduct tests and interviews online for summative assessment, with one school even conducting online exhibitions. For diagnostic testing, several schools mention the application of digital recordings, both audio and visual, to establish baselines. Other schools said they introduced diagnostic writing assessments monitored through an online communication platform and online entry-level tests or examinations. Most international schools serving 11 to 15-year-olds have also adopted new forms of assessment for them during the pandemic in particular. 94% of schools responding to the research introduced these to formatively assess students through online solutions. New formative assessment approaches introduced by many international schools included digital recordings of students, again, both audio and video, and study projects. Some of the most common digital platforms cited for this age group included Flipgrid, Screencastify, Pear Deck, Nearpod, Padlet, Kahoot, Khan Academy, IXL, and Google Jamboard. And then moving on to 16 to 18-year-olds. During those same campus closures, again, we saw developments in new formative assessment methods. So again, the use of audio and visual digital recordings, collaborative digital projects, problem-based learning, and online breakout rooms, lots of collaboration going on in online breakout rooms. For 77% of schools, these were introduced in order to summatively assess students through online solutions. New approaches for summative assessment included digital projects and digital presentations, student computerized adaptive tests such as map testing, evidence-based teacher assessment, and online exams. And several schools particularly mentioned the use of exam.net. Interestingly, although the pandemic instigated many of these new forms of assessment, many schools have retained them post-pandemic, as they often more appropriately answer the needs of students and the wider school community. Moving on from curricular and assessment to exit examinations, the leading exit qualifications offered within the international schools market remain as they have done for many years. And the percentages that you can see here are all based on all international schools serving 16 to 18-year-olds. The A in international A-levels remain the most popular exit qualification and are offered by 35% of international schools serving 16 to 18-year-olds. The International Baccalaureate Diploma Programme is also very popular, offered at 28% of all international schools, and Advanced Placement is currently offered at 16% of these schools. And an increasing number of international schools are now offering a choice of exit examinations, such as the IB Diploma or A-levels, often in response to student demand. Some international schools are also moving to additional options, such as Mastery Transcript. So plenty to keep an eye on there. I touched earlier on the importance of English language fluency and the increasing demand for bilingual schooling when looking at what's driving the interest in international schooling. Now, here's a look on this screen of the data that shows us what's happening with the language of learning. Although English remains the primary language for learning and business around the world, our data is showing a notable shift towards English as just one of the languages of learning now being offered in many international schools. 5 years ago, 71% of the international schools market was delivering English medium learning only, and 29% were offering bilingual learning. Across the entire international schools market, bilingual or multilingual learning is now offered in 35% of all international schools. The change is driven by a number of factors. Many parents want their child to value their home language and cultural heritage, as well as becoming good English speakers. There's also a growing academic understanding of the importance of mother tongue, of bilingual learning as a significant influence in brain development, and of the impact of subtractive bilingualism on children. In addition, there are some governments that require their host nation students who are attending an international school in their home country to receive some language learning delivered in their national language. As international school fees increase, however, bilingual offerings appear to decline. Currently, 30% of all premium fee international schools have a bilingual offering. This may relate to the lower number of host nation students that are, on average, attending the premium fee schools. And when we look at the language of learning offered by all UK-oriented international schools, just 22% of schools are delivering bilingual or multilingual learning. Although many parents who select an international school for their child remain really focused on English language fluency, there is a growing recognition amongst international school educators of the need to evaluate language learning provision. The benefits a strong developed first language can provide a student, as well as the more nuanced challenges that being an English as an additional language learner can bring. Now, associations and accrediting bodies have a significant influence on the quality of international schools around the world. Associations provide international schools with a network of colleagues, continuing professional development, and various sporting and arts events. International and regional associations often host an annual conference alongside a number of smaller, perhaps more specialized events throughout the year, providing both schools and suppliers with opportunities to meet and exchange ideas, to learn about the latest resources and resource needs. So they're incredibly valuable within the international schools market. But you may find this next figure a surprise. Just 17% of all international schools are internationally accredited. For many good international schools, particularly those located in countries where there are no national inspection requirements for international schools, accreditation is very important. It helps the school to raise its standards. It sets the school apart from other schools it competes with, and it provides an independent quality mark that can attract good teachers and leaders, as well as appeal to families during school selection. This could be a very successful segmentation route for your organization if your strategy is highly targeted or you're offering niche. Now, we've looked at some of the current trends, but what about the future? Well, ISC closely tracks both emerging and developing trends within the international schools sector through our continual qualitative research conducted directly with the international school leaders. A typical school visit for one of the field research team may comprise of time spent with the head of school, head of admissions and marketing, the school business manager or head of operations, head of curriculum or teaching and learning, IT, innovation, HR, the list goes on. We spend time touring the school where we can on in-person visits, learning more about what's happening on a day-to-day basis, and most importantly, where schools are investing their time and resource and what their strategic plans are. And it's through these conversations that we know that the issues that you see on screen here are being addressed by more international schools within both their short and longer term strategic plans. Firstly, we know that schools are addressing the challenges of student recruitment and CPD through new and broader solutions. They're looking to train staff in-house to recruit from a wider pool. And this is a key trend as it becomes more and more challenging to find quality teaching staff. Embedding diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, often better known as DEIJ, into the school-wide ethos and strategy, in turn impacting recruitment, curriculum, and resources, is really a big point of consideration for schools at the moment. Interestingly, one of the biggest challenges here can be getting parents on board. Placing well-being at the heart of teaching and learning and addressing it across the entire school community. The impact of COVID continues, and developing life skills and resilience is now paramount. Having spoken to a number of heads of admissions all over the world, we found an interesting trend starting to emerge, which is that happiness is overtaking academics in importance, according to those people we interviewed. Parents are increasingly seeking to find that their child will be happy, that their well-being will be taken care of. The academics are considered a given. Centering school life around sustainability, as well as embedding it throughout the curriculum, is increasingly seen as an integral part of global citizenship. Often student-led, certifications are increasingly sought, with initiatives including the adoption of solar panels, digital textbooks, science and kitchen gardens, outdoor learning, maker spaces, design and tech projects. They're all increasingly commonplace. Developing technology competencies by all school staff, not just an IT department, so that technology can be used as a tool to support teaching, to support personalized learning, professional administration, and engagement throughout the school community. Schools are exploring and adopting EdTech and AI provision at a rapid rate. Developing safeguarding measures for an international context that include protecting students from both physical and emotional harm, as well as increasingly data protection and cybersecurity. For many schools, this is above and beyond local regulation and expectations, and there can be some real cultural challenges associated with that. So, having talked about the current market data, existing and some emerging trends, I'd like to focus on our final section, key markets for the future. Since July 2021, just 2 years ago, 469 international schools have opened around the world. That promise of learning in English and sitting globally recognized exams as a route to English medium higher education, global career opportunities, has made international schooling appealing to many. This education movement has really gained momentum as the economies of various countries have improved, and today an international school education is a real priority for many families with the financial means. As a result, whilst the market still caters to the very wealthy families, demand is also fueled, of course, by local and expatriate families who are willing to pay fees that they can afford. And this has prompted the development of international schools at a more affordable price point compared to other international schools within their locality, and in turn opening access to this type of education for many, many more families. In order to analyse growth and differences, ISC research splits the market into premium fee schools, mid-market fee schools, and low fee schools. This split is based only on the fees. It makes absolutely no judgment on the standard of the school, meaning that you could quite easily have an outstanding school that falls into the mid-market fee sector. We're simply dividing them by fees. New mid-market fee schools keep opening, and 23% of new international schools opened since the 1st of July 2021 fall into the mid-market fee bracket. 65% of these recently founded schools are based in Asia, with 103 schools, that's 22%, in Western Asia, followed by 86 schools or 18% in Eastern Asia, and 80 schools or 17% in Southeastern Asia. Globally, these newly established schools currently enroll 79,160 students, with 57,750 of those students enrolled in international schools based in Asia. Breaking that down even a little bit further, Western Asia is leading the way with just over 50% of student enrolments in recently opened international schools in Asia, with the vast majority of those in the UAE. Southeastern Asia is next, that's probably not a surprise, with 23% of student enrolments in Asia, and the strong majority of those in Vietnam, which has over 60% of Southeastern Asia student enrolments from recent times. Drilling down further to individual countries, most new international schools founded since July 2021 are based in the following countries, and they represent 40% of the total number of international schools opened in this time. You have the percentages on screen, but to give further context, they equate to 65 schools in the UAE, 47 schools in China, 33 schools in Vietnam, 20 schools in Japan, 25 schools in India. Now, the UAE and China have been key markets for many years, and they remain important. Vietnam emerged a few years ago following some legislative changes, and its international school numbers have kept increasing ever since. Japan and India are slightly more recent additions to the international schools, growing markets in the last 2 years. But why are all of these countries key? Well, I'd like to take a very quick look country by country. So starting with India, India has 879 international schools already, including 25 new schools that opened in the last 2 years and 28 future schools in development. So why is the market growing so fast there? Well, growth of international schools in India's tier 1 metro cities of Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, Bangalore, and increasingly Hyderabad and Kolkata, these are the cities where international business is prevalent. There are international schools already established, and there's sufficient demand from both expatriates and local families with the financial means and aspiration for international education. There's high demand for international schools in India's tier 2 cities due to the availability of varying price points for parents that suit their financial conditions. The embracing of some elements of international curricula within the country's state education, encouraged by the government, is giving host nation parents more confidence of its value. For example, in 2020, the Delhi government launched a pilot to introduce the International Baccalaureate Diploma Programme into 30 public schools, raising the recognition of the curriculum across many families in the city. The international schools that are offering the IBDP and employing educators who are skilled and experienced in delivering the curriculum are now becoming a preferred choice for parents. An increase in the number of expatriate professionals to India, including East and Southern Eastern Asian expatriates and their families, is having an impact, as well as those typical expatriates that we often saw coming from Western countries. And to just give you a little bit of a flavour of what's popular in India at the moment, let's have a quick look at the current exit examinations offered in Indian international schools. The A and the international A levels remain the most popular exit qualification. They're offered by 32% of international schools. The International Baccalaureate Diploma Programme is also incredibly popular, offered at 27% of schools, and advanced placement is currently offered by 15% of these schools. Moving on to Japan. With 363 international schools already, including 20 new schools opened in the past 2 years and 4 future schools in development, why is the international schools market growing so fast in Japan? Well, demand from host national families remains relatively modest, and there's not the huge move to escape state-provided education at all costs that we do see in some countries, like Egypt, for example. But the country is increasingly attracting more expatriates, with foreign nationals up 11% in the last year, many of whom naturally wish to access international education for their families. Japan also didn't have any foreign independent school brand campuses until last year, when Harrow opened a school in Appy. With another 2 high-profile British independent school brand schools, Rugby School and Malvern College, both opening in Japan this academic year, These new ventures are really shining a spotlight on both British education and the international schools market as a whole in the country, and they're raising awareness of alternatives to local education options. At least one of these foreign branded schools has also made it clear that they are targeting wealthy Chinese families who have the desire and the means to move to access international education for their children at any age. Now, in Vietnam, there are currently 349 international schools, including 33 schools that have opened in the past 2 years and 12 future schools in development. So what are the reasons for this growth? A significant growth in the desire for international school education from local families. Much of this demand is dependent on a fee point that these parents can afford. Where there's affordability, there is high demand. A growth in demand from expatriate families who've moved to the country. Also, lower cost of living in some countries of Southeastern Asia, combined with their potential for extensive travel opportunities, all combine to make the country more attractive. The emergence of high-profile foreign independent schools with premium-style campus buildings in several cities. Not only do these schools attract wealthy and educationally competitive parents, they also generate curiosity and raise awareness of all international education offerings in these cities to more people. A variety of initiatives, particularly tax breaks from the Vietnamese government, encouraging foreign investment and government collaborations in Vietnam, are also contributing to growth. Now, with well over 1,100 international schools already, including 47 new schools that have opened in the past 24 months and 28 future schools in development, why is the international schools market continuing to grow in China despite those continued stringent restrictions for host nation children to attend international schools in China? Well, the desire for quality international education remains extremely high amongst Chinese families. And while some, due to enrolment restrictions, may opt to seek this outside of China, for example, we're seeing people send their children to ultra-premium fee boarding schools abroad or moving part of the family to Southeast Asia so their children can attend day schools, many others are remaining in country and accessing whatever international education they can there. And that's one of the reasons we're still seeing more premium fee schools opening compared to mid-market fee schools in China. In fact, almost 60% of the newly opened international schools in China are premium fee schools. International school leaders in China tell us that the restrictions around the enrollment of Chinese children at international schools in China means that decisions to establish or to expand international schools, particularly Chinese-owned private schools, are not so much about demand. Rather, they are about the climate and complexity of operating in China and how willing and able an investor is to manage any political, operational, or reputational risks and to navigate the increasing range of regulations that does impact international schools. Back onto home ground for me, the UAE, with 772 international schools already, including 65 new schools opened in the past 2 years and 23 future schools in development. Why is the international schools market growing so fast in the UAE? Well, we're seeing a significant increase in the number of expatriates, notably Chinese, Russian, and Ukrainian nationals, but also those from Europe, South and Southeast Asian countries who are settling in the UAE, continue to be attracted by tax-free living and increasingly by a booming economy. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Sharjah are all going through significant urban development, which is expected to result in more international schools, with Dubai alone planning to double its population by 2040. This, of course, requires further development of infrastructure, including schools. One of the trends that we're seeing in Dubai at the moment is that these schools are being located to support distinct community suburbs that are emerging as the city continues to expand, all of which requires more schools. Now, one other area of growth in the international schools market is that of groups. And let me clarify what we mean by school groups. At ISC Research, we classify an international school group as one which owns international schools that are part of the group or has a financial interest in international schools by managing them or providing key services to them without necessarily owning them. Today, school groups are taking on a much greater significance, with their potential to develop common standards and staff development, as well as build brand recognition. School groups play a crucial role in raising standards and attracting enrolment demand across the entire international schools market. ISC Research currently tracks close to 600 school groups. They represent 36% of the total market right now. Some of this growth has come about through new school development, but much has occurred through the acquisition of existing schools. These numbers mean that there are still 64% of international schools that are individual, often family or sole-owned schools. Now on screen, you can see the top 5 groups and brands counting the highest number of international schools and their country of origin, as per ISC data research listed on the left, with the groups looking to open future schools on the right. 58% of the future schools due to open in the next 4 years will be part of school groups, with Maple Bear Global, as you can see there, leading the way. But perhaps the question you'd most like answered is, where are future schools going to be opening, whether they're part of groups or not? This final data slide shows you where future international schools are currently planned to be opened. As mentioned earlier, most development remains in Asia. Out of 313 schools due to open by 2027, 61% are based in Asia. The countries counting the highest numbers of future schools are India, with 28 schools opening. China also has 28 future schools in the pipeline. There are 23 schools set to open in the UAE. And in Southeastern Asia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia count the highest numbers of future schools, with 13, 12, 8, and 8 future schools respectively. It's also worth noting that the most future schools opening in Africa will be based in Egypt. We've got record of 20 new schools set to open there. That's 54% of future schools in Africa and 6% of future schools globally. The international schools market is flourishing in many countries of the world, and this is expected to continue if mobility persists between countries, good education continues to be viewed as a route to growth and opportunity, education choice is available for those with varied financial means, education investment continues to be prioritized within families' own expenditures, international understanding continues to be valued, and finally, that international schools offer more that is valued by parents than that is accessible to them from other school types. It's that difference that's the important. In conclusion, our data and intelligence at ISC Research shows that the future of the international schools market looks positive, with growth to continue in coming years. And that brings me to the end of the presentation today, which I do hope you found informative. As promised, we're happy to answer any questions you might have in the time remaining. I have seen a number come through during the course of the presentation, so we will start with those. Okay, the first one, I'm actually going to defer to my colleague, Freddie Cloak, who I think is on the call. I hope he's on the call, because this is about international school development. Freddie is our head of school development at ISC Research. And the question is, are there any countries other than the ones that you've highlighted that we should be monitoring in terms of international school development opportunities? There's Freddie, fantastic. Freddie, could I pass that one over to you? Because I think with it being international school development, you're probably best placed to answer that.
Hi, yeah, sure. So just to repeat, so the question was, are there any countries other than the ones you've highlighted that we should be monitoring in terms of international school development opportunities?
Yes, that's the one. Thank you.
Perfect, yeah. Sorry, a bit late to come in. Yeah, so you obviously highlighted UAE, Japan, China, India, amongst others. So other countries would probably consider Thailand, for example. So Thailand, its appeal as a regional hub. It's got a very established expatriate community, which is contributing to the continued growth of international schools. A lot of the international schools are based around Bangkok, but there's other opportunities in other parts of the country. Indonesia is another country, a large population, growing middle class. So that's showing potential for international school development, particularly in and around the capital, Jakarta. Malaysia's reputation for quality education, a diverse expat community, especially more families coming from China and from South Korea, is creating opportunities for international schools there. Another country that we didn't mention, which is actually getting a lot of profile in terms of international school development, is Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia has been investing heavily in education reform with its Vision Education 2030. So there's plans to open more international schools in that country, very much driven by a local demand, and likely in cities like Riyadh and Jeddah. Qatar, another country in the Middle East, they're focused on education as part of its development strategy. So that's leading to growth in international schools, particularly in the capital, Doha. In Latin America, Brazil, there's improving economic conditions in the country and an increasing interest in English language education. So that's creating opportunities for international school development, especially in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. In Africa, there's two countries would highlight for growth. Nigeria, with a very high population size and growing middle class, that's leading to an increasing demand for quality education. That's making it a country to watch for international school development. And Kenya, as its reputation as East African hub, a rising expat population and demand from local Kenyan nationals as well for international schools. And that's particularly in the capital in Nairobi.
Super. That was a super fast and really helpful roundup, Freddie. In case anybody missed that there, obviously the countries that I'd mentioned in the presentation were India, China, Japan, Vietnam, and the UAE. Freddie, I think there added Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Brazil, and sorry, I didn't get to scribble down quickly enough the African countries.
Yeah, so I'll slow it down a bit. So Thailand was the first one, Indonesia, Malaysia, so all of Southeast Asia. In the Middle East, it would be Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Brazil would be the main country in Latin America where we'll see opportunities for international school development. And then in West and East Africa would be Nigeria and Kenya.
Super, thank you. And I think obviously looking at the people who have posed questions and those who are attending today, if you are looking at establishing a school overseas, as Freddie said, these are great countries to be looking at. If you are an education supplier, also really worthwhile knowing about, as school growth continues to happen there become more and more opportunities to support schools in those countries. The next question I've got is, well, I think one that I will field. It is about my home stomping ground. Isn't the UAE market saturated for schools now? There's a really quick answer to this, which is no. I've been fielding this question for the last 10 years, and the market continues to grow. For those of you who aren't familiar with the UAE, and indeed many of the Gulf states, the expatriate population here makes up more than 80% of our overall population. And it's growing, it's continuing to grow quite rapidly. We're seeing economic migration on a level never seen before, as people are seeking to escape conflict in certain parts of the world, government policy in other parts of the world, cost of living crises, those kinds of things. I think what's interesting about here is that the market is becoming more localized, and that's creating demand in itself. As Dubai grows and the infrastructure grows, perhaps not at quite the same pace. Certainly when I first moved here 20 years ago, people would quite happily drive 45 minutes to take their children to school. That's not really the case anymore, and traffic is really quite brutal during school drop-off and pick-up times. So people are looking for a school in their local community, and so we're starting to see school growth coming up in these almost pseudo-catchment areas. We're also starting to see an increased enrolment from Emiratis in the UAE, so local national people who are particularly interested, I think, of late in charter or PPP schools, which teach international curricula in English. So that's a whole other sector which would still fall under international schools. They're teaching an international curriculum in English, but perhaps a bit more accessible and culturally sensitive to the local culture. So that is the answer to that one. Now, we've got one that says, you've talked about the growth of school groups. Any advice on how to market to them rather than to individual schools? Katie, I hope you are on the call. I think I saw you earlier. Katie is a works in business development for ISC, and I think this might be one for you. If you're there. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Katie. Fabulous.
Okay.
Thank you. And we can see you. Beautiful.
Okay. Hi. Yes, as you highlighted, Nalini, a number of international schools will belong to a wider group. And doing your research and understanding the size and scope of the group, where they operate, and the schools they own and manage is a vital first step in developing a successful marketing outreach plan. It's also important to understand how a group operates. Some will keep a tight rein on budgets, others will give their schools autonomy of spend and supplier choice. Groups will usually want to leverage their buying power to get more favourable terms when products or solutions apply to all of their schools. But it's quite usual for a group to include schools that offer different tuition fee ranges, different curricula, and they teach different age ranges. So understanding how your solution aligns with the needs of the school and the group is critical and will help you position your company and your solution in the right way. The ISC Outreach Live database provides all the information you need to do this, as well as over 67,000 key stakeholder contacts in the schools themselves. There are details of more than 600 school groups, the schools they own and manage, and the C-level contact details who have an overarching responsibility for the schools in the group. Marketing at both group level and to the right stakeholders in the schools will go a long way to enhancing awareness of your brand and your solution. What I will mention is alongside the database, we're hosting a series of marketing masterclass webinars, the first of which is on the 18th of October, and this will focus specifically on effective marketing to schools and groups. You can find details of that on the website.
Oh, that's perfect, Katie. And that was, I think, a really that was a pertinent plug there, particularly if you are looking at how to market into schools, as that question indicated. That's a really good thing to be aware of. My next one is back to Freddie, I'm afraid. I'm racing through now to try and get through as many as we can. This is about what overseas investors are looking for from an independent school brand from the US or the UK. So I know, Freddie, you work with not just the US and UK independent schools looking at going overseas. You are working with obviously a lot of overseas investors who are looking to set up such partnerships. So from the investor point of view, what is it that they're looking for from an independent school brand in order to succeed in the international schools market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of different criteria that investors will be looking for. They'll have their own specific criteria and their own specific expectations, depending on the project that they're looking at. But I think generally speaking, in terms of general overview, what they're looking for from an operating partner, such as a UK independent school or a US independent school, I think first would be track record and reputation. So investors seek operating partners with a proven track record of running successful schools, either in their own country or overseas. So that could be a strong reputation for providing both quality education and achieving academic success. Expertise in education, of course, is important from an operating partner. So investors will value partners with deep knowledge of educational practices, curriculum development and teaching methodologies, and student support services such as higher education or careers pathway guidance. Also, I think an understanding of the regulatory aspects. Usually this sits with the investor, but operating partners who can understand and can navigate the regulatory landscape of the target country's education sector would lead to a better partnership. So understanding compliance with local laws, licensing requirements, education standards, etc. The other aspect I'd say is strong leadership and management. So investors look for partners with capable leadership and effective management skills to ensure that the future school has smooth day-to-day operations, faculty management, as well as strategic decision-making. Market insights, so an understanding of the market that you're going into, the local education market, the demand trends, competitive landscape, and potential growth opportunities. Innovation and adaptability. We're talking about emerging trends in education earlier in the presentation, so investors are also seeking this. So partners who can innovate and adapt to changing education trends and technologies. The ability to implement modern teaching tools and methodologies is very valuable. Another aspect perhaps would be student-centric approach. So investors appreciate partners who prioritize the well-being and the development of students. So and operating partners who offer a holistic education experience and expertise in that area can be very useful. Boarding schools, for example, with their expertise in pastoral care is very valuable. I'd also say communication skills. Effective communication between the operating partner and investor is essential. So especially when you're trying to build trust and you're trying to align expectations on the project. And then the final two would be commitment to values. So investors would look for partners who educational philosophy aligns with their own values and goals for providing quality education. So that's very important when you're trying to set a partnership together, that you're aligned in both ways. And then sustainability. So operating partners would look for those who have experience in both with a sustainable business model, both financially and environmentally. And then that's very attractive to investors who are focused on a very long-term success.
Thank you. Some really good hints and tips there for anyone looking to go down that pathway. I'm conscious of time, and unfortunately we've come to the hour and we've managed to get through, I think, 4 or 5 of our 16 questions. Please don't worry, we will respond to anybody whose question we haven't been able to answer live today. We will be responding to you individually. Your question will be answered. Before we sign off, I'd like to just very quickly highlight our wonderful new community platform where you can keep abreast of international school trends. You can attend plenty of events such as webinars, podcasts, fireside chats, and of course, the annual International School Awards, which highlight best practice ongoing in international schools around the world. It's completely free to join. Simply sign up at the address on screen. I did promise earlier that I would make it easy for you to connect with us on social media. So you can scan those QR codes here to link directly with our accounts if you'd like to. We regularly share our data and intelligence as well as events on our social media accounts. And finally, thank you. Thank you for listening, and do feel free to connect with me personally via email or LinkedIn if you wish to, and of course with the rest of our team. Thank you.